Okay, to solve questions 2 and 6 from the Advanced Algebra 2 homework, it says to solve the equations by factoring and to check your answers. Now remember, before we factor here, before we try to solve, we want to set this quadratic equation equal to 0. So we're going to say x squared, we're going to subtract the 9x. I'm still going to add 18, and now that it's equal to 0, what we can do is we can factor and set the individual factors equal to 0 by the zero product property. So in this case, we have 3 terms, no GCF, quadratic. We know it's going to factor into 2 binomials. We know the first term in each set of binomials is x, because x times x is x squared. Now we're looking for a combination of numbers that multiplied together gives us 18. When added together gives us negative 9. Now we know they're both going to have to be negative, because a negative times a negative is a positive, a negative plus a negative is a negative. In this case, it's going to be 6 and 3, or 3 and 6. So now we have that x minus 6 times x minus 3 equals 0. Okay, now that we have a product, okay, the product is answer to a multiplication problem. We know this is multiplication. It's the whole idea of factoring, because we have this binomial times this one. And the zero product property says that if the product 0, 1 or more of the factors has to be 0, and that allows us to solve. So in order for this factor to be 0, we set it equal to 0 and solve for x. So this is 6. So if you were to plug a 6 into here, this would be 0 times x minus 3, which would be 0 times 3, which would be 0. So this would be a solution. To double check it back into the original. This would be 6 squared would be 36. 36 plus 18 would be 54. 9 times 6 is 54, so that checks out. Here, set the second factor equal to 0, because if this one's equal to 0, the product will also be 0. And if you were to take this and plug it in here, it would give us a product of 0, so it appears to be a solution. Check it back in the original. 9 plus 18 is 27. 9 times 3 is 27. Or, if you would like to graph or use the quadratic formula, that would work as well. Let's switch over to math here. Y equals x squared minus 9x plus 18. And let's graph this and see if we can see the x-intercepts, which are our solutions, or our zeros. In this case, we have 3 and 6. So we know that we've done this correctly by several methods. Okay, we're going to do the same thing for the second problem. First thing we have to do is we have to set it equal to 0. So we have 3x squared minus 16x minus 12 equals 0. There is no GCF. Okay, we also have 3 terms, but this time a is not 1. Still a quadratic, still going to factor into 2 binomials, but this time it's not going to be x and x, it's going to be 3x and x. This does make it a little bit easier because a is prime, so we know it has to be 3x and x, or x and 3x. Now, 12 or negative 12 does have quite a few factors, so maybe you want to use the AC method. Maybe you just want to try to guess and check. Now, as far as our signs go, the product is negative, so one has to be negative and one has to be positive. When we take O times O and I times I and add those together, our sum is negative as well. So we want the larger of the two products to be negative. So I'm going to assume the negative is going to go here. Now this is an assumption, not always true, but I would say statistically this should work out. So we'd have a plus here. So if we were guessing and checking, we know for 12, we have 4 and 3. If we put a 4 here, that would only give us 12 minus 3. Not going to be it. We need numbers that are a little bit bigger. If we put a 6 here and a 2 here, we have negative 18x plus 2x. Gives us our negative 16x. So that's the guess and check method. It does work out. If you wanted to use AC, we're going to find a combination of numbers that multiplied together gives us negative 36. When added together gives us negative 16. That's a negative 18 times 2, or a negative 18 plus 2. So we would take this binomial, we would break apart the middle term using these as our coefficients. 3x squared minus 18x plus 2x minus 12 equals 0. Have not changed the value of this quadratic equation, but we now have 4 terms. With 4 terms, we always group, first 2 and the last 2. Pull out the GCF of each binomial. We have 3x times x minus 6. Here we're going to pull out a positive 2, leaving us with x minus 6. These binomials are identical, which is good, so we can write this quadratic as the product of these 2 binomials, 3x plus 2 and x minus 6, just as we have above. To solve, again, zero product property, we set each of the factors equal to 0. So 3x equals a negative 2, x equals a negative 2/3. Check back in the original, it will work here. X minus 6 equals 0, so x equals 6. So those are our two zeros. We want to check back in the original. Those will work, and you could graph as well or use the quadratic formula, and that's how you solve questions 2 and 6 from the Advanced Algebra 2 homework.